The San Andreas Fault is a geological time bomb that looms over the United States west coast. It's a location where two massive tectonic plates collide and grind against each other, generating massive amounts of pressure that build up with each passing day. The fault's sheer size is breathtaking, stretching over 800 miles and capable of producing earthquakes of unprecedented magnitude. When the San Andreas Fault finally cracks, the consequences will be disastrous. The ground will tremble violently, tearing open gaping chasms and reducing buildings to rubble. The air will be filled with the deafening roar of collapsing infrastructure and panicked screams. And, well, this might already be happening. Thomas Jordan, the director of the Southern California Earthquake Center, recently made an announcement that should have sent a shiver down the spine of every one of us. He stated that the San Andreas Fault looks like it's in a critical state and, as a result, could generate a large earthquake in the very near future. It's new information that the fault's southernmost section appears to be fully charged and ready to go off at any moment. The repetition of the seismic hazard to Californians is, of course, not news, but the warning itself is. What could possibly be the motivation behind this renowned seismologist's alarming statements? Since 1857, the southern portion of the San Andreas Fault system has not experienced a significant release of stresses due to the fact that there has not been a major earthquake there since 1857. Now, the San Andreas Fault is just one of several fault systems that roughly mark the boundary between the North American and the Pacific tectonic plates. To put it another way, the San Andreas is a mountain range, and both plates are moving in what can be described as a roughly northerly direction. However, the Pacific plate is moving at a rate that is considerably higher than that of its North American counterpart. This means that stresses are continually building up between the two plates. Some of these stresses were released catastrophically in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1906 during a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and then again in Northern California during the 6.9 magnitude Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. Both of these events occurred in California. However, given that similar events of this magnitude have not taken place along the San Andreas Fault in the south of the state, the 1994 Northridge event was linked to a nearby but separate fault system. It has been hypothesized that such an event is imminent, and that given the amount of stress that may actually have accumulated, it will be the quote-unquote big one. However, such catastrophic events have never taken place along the San Andreas Fault in Northern California. But how severe could this potential earthquake be? And is it even remotely possible that the devastation depicted in the movie San Andreas could actually take place? Now, for those of you who have not watched the movie, it just depicts this exact scenario and how things would turn out in an event like this. In a nutshell, residents of California are going to be, well, to a certain extent, satisfied with the responses to these questions. In the movie, the San Andreas Fault is responsible for an earthquake that registers a magnitude of 9.0. In general, earthquakes of this magnitude are confined to regions of the Earth where subduction is taking place, which is when one tectonic plate is being forced below another. For example, Chile and Japan are both examples of regions on the Earth where subduction is taking place. The tectonic activity in California is distinct from that in other states. At this point, two plates are moving past each other in a sliding motion. As a result, the most recent predictions put the maximum possible earthquake magnitude along the San Andreas Fault system at 8.0. Despite the fact that there is only a 7% probability estimate that such an event could occur in Southern California in the next 30 years. However, there is a 75% chance of an event with a magnitude of 7.0 occurring during the same time period. Although the differences between magnitudes 7.0, 8.0, and 9.0 may appear to be negligible, there is a significant difference in the amount of energy that would be released by such events. An event with a magnitude of 9.0 would release 32 times more energy than an event with a magnitude of 8.0, and a magnitude of 9.0 would release 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 7. Damage is certain to occur regardless of the magnitude of the earthquake, whether it measures 7.0 or 8.0, but the entire chain of events that are depicted in the movie is highly improbable. For instance, the San Andreas Fault does not run beneath any body of water. As a consequence, any slippage along it cannot displace water to the extent that it would cause a tsunami to be generated. As the tectonic plates are sliding relative to one another and not away from one another, the formation of a massive chasm is another element that belongs in the realm of fantasy. However, one thing that cannot be denied is how likely it is that a significant amount of property will be lost. Although California has stringent building codes that prohibit the construction of new buildings near known fault lines and recommend that older buildings be retrofitted with seismic protection measures, it's impossible to build a structure that is completely free from the risk of damage in the event of an earthquake. In order to better understand the effects of a large earthquake in the southern part of the San Andreas Fault, the United States Geological Survey modeled a 7.8 magnitude event with slippage of 2 to 7 meters to represent the stresses that have built up in the area since the last large event. It was determined using this model that the construction that straddled the fault would sustain the greatest amount of damage. Since the passing of the Anquis-Priolo Earthquake Fault Zoning Act in 1972, thankfully, constructions of this kind have become exceedingly uncommon. The 966 roads, 90 fiber optic cables, 39 gas pipes, and 141 power lines that cross the fault zone are the ones that stand to be impacted by the slippage. It was estimated that the total cost of damage to buildings was $33 billion, with modern buildings faring well, but older buildings being especially susceptible to damage. As gas mains and water mains become severed, fires will break out, as they did after the Northridge earthquake. In fact, the damage that will result from the fires is estimated to be more costly than the damage that will result from the initial shaking. It is estimated that 1,800 people would die as a result of this disaster. And just when it seems like things can't possibly get any worse, the main event will have destabilized the tectonics of the region to such an extent that a series of aftershocks that have the potential to be quite powerful will begin. As an example, Christchurch, New Zealand was hit by an earthquake of 6.2 magnitudes in 2011. And ever since then, the city and the region surrounding it has been subjected to more than 10,000 aftershocks. The good news is that the movie San Andreas is completely made up, and it features the same level of exaggeration that we're all accustomed to seeing from filmmakers who, ironically, also have their headquarters in Southern California. Despite this, there is an extremely high probability that the San Andreas Fault will produce a sizable earthquake in the not-too-distant future. When it does arrive, it will cause significant damage, and Southern California will be heavily impacted by its effects. But people who live in California are used to dealing with natural disasters of this nature. And in more recent years, states' physical structures have been built with protection from earthquakes in mind. You can forget about tsunamis and deep chasms opening up, but you should prepare for violent shaking, damage to buildings, fires, and widespread economic impacts as a result of the region being rendered inoperable for an undetermined amount of time. Scientists have long predicted this, the impending quote-unquote big one, a catastrophic earthquake that will wreak havoc on the West Coast. Despite years of planning, we are woefully unprepared for the magnitude of destruction that such an event will bring. The San Andreas Fault serves as a reminder that our planet is alive, constantly shifting and changing, and that nature's forces are truly incredible in their power. The question is not whether the big one will strike, but when. And when it does, we can only hope that we're prepared to face the unspeakable horrors that await us.